And we're live. Welcome back to the LGBTQ plus business podcast. As always, I am here, and it is my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Stefan de Vries. Stefan,
Hi,
how are you?
Jamie. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm wrestling with a lot of what feels like sometimes pointless activity in the business, which is interesting because the conversation today is about processes.
Mm,
And I want to kick this off by suggesting that the difference between a business and a job that you've created for yourself
yeah,
is the existence of outsourced processes. That's an idea, presumably not originally, but from the E Myth. Um, and I just wanted to open this conversation up by asking why you thought that was the case.
yeah. It's a great question, and it's a great concept that a lot of business owners, really the ones that are starting out, need to understand. Because I know that you're building a business around your passion, and it revolves around you, what you can do, and what you have been doing maybe last few years. But in the end, you're a business owner, right? You want to build a business. If you're not thinking about building processes around what you do and actually helping the business forward so it can scale, it can grow and scale beyond just what you're doing, so you can actually impact more people. But if you're not even thinking about that, and if you feel like you have to do everything yourself, then you just create a job for yourself. And I think a lot of people mistakenly see that as a business. It starts for everybody, it starts like that. Everybody just does everything, right? We've gone through this, you've gone through this, me as well, for sure. And but every step of the way that you grow as a business, the first couple of clients that you get, you need to already start thinking like, okay, how am I going to make sure that if tomorrow new customers come in again, that the process that I used before to onboard people is replicable. So, in a way that at a certain point, I can give that process to somebody and they can do it for me instead of keep doing it all by yourself. I don't want to be in a job, honestly. Nobody wants to be in a job anymore if they build businesses. So, why are you getting stuck and just doing everything yourself again and again and again and again? It doesn't make sense.
It's also overly reliant on your abilities to be awake, healthy,
Yeah,
energetic. You're just leveraging an incredible amount of your business's activities on how performative you can be. I mean, in the same book, in the E Myth, there's this idea that you shouldn't think of your business as the product or service. You should think of it as the structure, such that if someone walked into it, you could sell the business on the basis of how well it all worked.
yeah. 100%. That's it. Huh? That's why we have to create these processes to make the business sellable. Somebody that sees that your business is turning profit and that it's systemized and that it can run without you, whatever team that you set into your business, and if they are trained, they can run the business for you. Well, that's a sellable business. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to sell the business. It's just a concept of create a sellable business. So, yeah, Jamie, if you want to take a holiday next week, all of a sudden because it's nice weather outside, well, you should be able to do that as a business owner. But if you're not in that situation where you have those processes ready, well, there's nobody else who is going to do the job. So you have to keep doing it, and
You're
you
then,
don't have the time to go on a holiday.
you're then, and I say this with no disrespect towards freelancing, which is what I've done a huge amount of, but you're a glorified freelancer
Yeah.
as opposed to a business owner. So let's get into it. What's an example of the kind of process that you would recommend implementing?
Well, it's everything. Everything that you do within your business on a day-to-day basis is a process. Everything that you do is a process. So the way that I look at it is you have to think about what are you doing day to day. And the best way to start basically is doing a time analysis, right? Is really looking at what did I do last week in terms of tasks, for example, And if you don't know, that's okay. Then start today. Start writing down in a notebook what you are doing day in, day out, right? And quickly you will see some of the same things popping up. The most common things as a starter is lead generation, is outreach, is content creation, is delivery, hopefully, if you have some clients. Um, Anything that revolves around getting more customers through the door, that's what you're basically doing day in, day out, right? So if you identify those processes, then you have to visualize them step by step. It's not enough saying, oh, I do lead generation, I will create a process around that. And okay, where do you start? So you need to know what is the exact steps that you're performing to do, yeah, to do the process, to generate those outcomes, right?
And it's interesting because you actually can't be too granular here. When you're working out how things are at the moment, the time saving is in the detail. You really do need to go, I then open a new tab. I then drop down, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Now, be careful here. Like, then people think, oh my God, that's too much work. Well, do I have to write all of this down? No, you just have to record what you're doing,
Mm,
right? Just, and especially if you're on a laptop and if you have a digital business, everything happens on your laptop or even on your phone. Well, record what you're doing. Record the process of lead generation, record the process of content creation, even. And that will give you an idea without having to write it down what you're doing.
yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of project management books that are worth recommending here. Because what project managers do is they go, okay, this thing is complicated and this could go wrong in a number of different places. So our job is to make sure it doesn't go wrong for number one. And number two, can we do it in a streamlined way? And if you think about, if you put on your project manager hat and you're no longer the business owner, but you're a consultant coming into the building and trying to work out how efficient is this, and you look with that lens, it's a really interesting exercise.
Yeah, and one of the exercises that you have to do, because if you're doing these day in, day out, these tasks all of the time, what kind of value do they produce within your
Mm.
business? Take a look at content creation, for example. Everybody is so high on content creation, you have to do that every single day. Some people batch create the content, but you're still like engaging with people, you're still posting it, and so on and so on. How much value is that kind of task? How much does it produce in terms of revenue? If I mean, it will not be a high value task. Yeah, it will create some traction and maybe it will create some leads for sure. But in the end, the creation of the content or the posting and so on, that's not high value, right? So you have to make sure that those kind of things that are not high value, you have to make a process out of that and you have to, yeah, delegate that as soon as possible or automate that.
That's interesting. So you're saying there's some relationship between the amount of time you spend on a task and the relative value you get out, and that should help you prioritize.
Yeah, think about if you're having a sales call and that sales call takes 30 minutes and you can close a 10K product, something that you sell, and you can close that in that 30 minutes. So basically, your 30 minutes is worth 10K,
Mm.
more or less, right? Now, if you create content all day long and you don't even have the time to do sales calls, I mean, 1 hour of content creation will not generate 10K, right?
Of course,
And
I mean,
that's
once you run the sum and look at the expected probabilities, you're making, you're not making real money at all.
no, and that's the thing. So those kind of tasks are the first ones that you need to delegate. And I know it sounds strange because you're the business owner, you know how to create content, you know what is the messaging behind it, what is the creatives and blah 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 blah. You know that and you also want to keep doing that because it's fun, but you're a business owner. Again, you're not a content creator. If you want to
Can,
be a content creator, then do that, but
can we just be clear about like when we say establish a process, What do we mean exactly? Do we mean a set of steps that are repeatable?
Yeah, it's about identifying a way to create predictable and repeatable outcomes. So if
Mm,
you're thinking about, again, lead generation, let's say lead generation. Okay, what are the exact steps that you have done to generate one lead? Create a process around that and make sure that you use that process again and again and again and again because you know that it generates leads, right? And that's something that you have to put into a process and you have to train other people to do it. And that's the key. It's not just about create the process and document it and so you can store it somewhere. That's not the point. It's the point is that you can train and show other people how to do it.
exactly, because then the variable of you isn't in the equation.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there's two big values so far. The first is you're diversifying. So no longer is production, be that sales or content creation or whatever else, reliant just on you. And
Hmm.
number two, you're not reliant on personalities. Because it's one thing to delegate without a system, and now you're relying on the person you've delegated to having a good day.
Yeah.
And good luck replacing them, by the way. Because it was 95% them and 5% any written down process. So it sounds like when it comes to training, onboarding, managing risk of turnover, a process is just vital.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It needs to be there. It needs to be clear enough for somebody that you onboard to execute, right? And don't get me wrong, even if you have the process and you have to give it to somebody and train somebody to do it, that person will still formulate their own version from that process, and that's fine, right? But at least you have something that you can show them and they can be onboarded pretty quickly. And also use a term like pair working to fast track that onboarding as well, where you just do the stuff together. You take the process, you do it together, and they just ask questions so you can formulate the nuances about how you do it. So they can see, oh, this is the step, but that's the nuance on how to do it. And then they go off, they do it by themselves, and they create their version of it. And in the end, you shouldn't be able, or you shouldn't have to take a look anymore if they're actually doing it well or not. It's about the outcomes. If you have a process that has predictable and repeatable outcomes, even a slight shift on how they do the process should not impact the outcomes. And if it does, well, then you have to reassess how they do it. But the outcomes is the stuff that you need to look at, not how they do it.
Yeah, and it's another advantage too, right? Which is you don't want you don't want the outcome. You don't want the outcome to change. So therefore, like the degree to which they can fiddle with the process is the degree to which it changes the outcome. If there are certain steps that they find work better for them or a more elegant way of doing things, you can either take that on and adjust the process formally, or you can say, well, look, as long as it produces the right outcome every time, and doing it both ways, then
Exactly.
that's fine. What do you
Exactly.
what do you perceive the big barriers to be to people setting up processes? Why do we not do it automatically?
Because we have an idea that it takes a lot of time to create processes. We think that we don't have time for that. We need to do sales, we need to do content creation, we need to do this and this and that. And if we create processes, we feel like it doesn't bring value, right? Remember, like I said, that you need to do the things that bring high value. And creating processes in many businesses' heads is about it doesn't bring value. Why would I do it? I don't even have anybody to do it. Yeah, but the longer that you keep your processes for yourself, the longer it will take that you're actually feeling comfortable onboarding somebody to give those processes. It's like you're so into doing the stuff, you're not even taking the time to make sure that if you grow, if you keep growing, that somebody that you onboard can learn it. If you wait until you onboard somebody to actually create those processes, you will waste a lot of time for yourself, for the person that you're onboarding, because you have to develop quickly your process, you have to give it to the other person, and then, I mean, stuff will break pretty quickly then, and you will lose a lot of time, and
And,
losing
and
time means losing money.
yeah, and also, when you onboard someone, you really want them to be like, God, these guys know what they're doing. You want them to think
Mm,
like, because everyone takes hints off each other about what the standards are, just subtly. And if you walk into an organization where this is your Bible, this is how you do it, we're going to pair work here, feedback is going to be delivered, you go, Jesus, okay, I need to switch on here. Whereas if it's a little bit haphazard, we kind of do it this way, it's not clear, it's very easy to lose someone psychologically before they've even really settled in.
yeah, yeah, they don't know what is happening, they don't know how to do it. So, and again, it doesn't have to take a lot of time to create processes. Again, like you already have the processes. Just hit record on your laptop, do a Loom, whatever, and record what you're doing and save it for later. Don't go into the details too much, just record what you're doing, save it for later. Once you onboard somebody, show them the videos, run them through, do the pair working, and make sure that they are onboarded as soon as possible so they can be productive, so they can generate value for your business. And then improve the processes while they are doing it.
I mean, that's the other detail is these processes don't need to be done perfectly first
No.
time. I think that's part of the overwhelm. In
Yeah.
fact, it's so funny how this works, right? Like you see what you look for. And if you start being process driven and conscious of the details of process, inevitably it'll get better and better and it'll change. I mean, would you recommend that people consciously assess their process on a monthly at a regular on a regular basis?
Yeah. Weekly. Weekly. Looking at your process and looking at the outcomes, right? One of the biggest things is looking at the outcomes is tracking what the process does and tracking the outcomes week by week by week. So you know, okay, we have set these metrics for the process. If it's for me, like if it's content creation, for example, one of the metrics is how many um, call to action DMs did we get or comments. So every piece of content that contains a call to action, well, how many people actually did the action, right? That's a simple metric that you can use, and it's really easy to track. So if you track that and if it doesn't improve, then your process might be off, right? Then or maybe lead generation. If you need like 4 sales calls per week to generate a sale per month, for example, well, track just how many sales calls that you have. And the sales calls are an outcome of a process. The process about lead generation. How do you do that, right? And if it week in, week out, it doesn't generate sales calls, you need to update and look at your process. Update your process. Don't change the process. Update the process.
What's the difference?
The difference is if you just change the process, then you'll never know what was wrong with the process. So if you have
Mm.
different steps in the process and you just say, okay, this isn't working, I'm going to just remove everything and just start all over with another process. Well, what did work? What worked and what didn't work in the previous process? You don't know. So I always say, like, if you have a process with 5 steps, well, start with optimizing or changing step 1 and see what is the outcome. If that,
Right, because some significant part of it will be working, but you'll be losing
yeah,
people at specific touch points.
yeah, yeah, that's the thing. It's really like the gears that you would connect with each other. So maybe one of the gears is not working well, but you have to find out which one. So what do? You adjust one gear, right? And okay, it's not really impacting anything. Turn back the gear and then do the next gear. Change a little bit. Oh, now the outcomes are changing. So stick to that, right? But if you just say everything gone and let's just do something completely different. Well, and what if it doesn't work again? What will you do? Another process and another process and switching platforms and blah blah blah, and you get into yeah a really bad situation where you get overwhelmed and frustrated because nothing seems to be working. Well, that's just because you don't know what has worked, right?
It sounds like you want evolution rather than revolution when it comes to your processes.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Take it step by step, continuous improvement, week by week, and being conscious, being really deliberate about what you do week in, week out with the measuring and with the improvements. It takes time to implement changes. It takes time for something to generate the outcomes that you want. If you're looking week in, week out, okay, 0 leads this week, so something else. Next week, again, 0 leads. It's not going to work like that, right? So,
So, what would you, in terms of software or getting organized practically, how would you recommend that people actually go about this?
well, basically, if you have Loom, I love Loom. I love to use that tool to record what I'm doing, for sure. Uh, and yeah, use some kind of tool where you can centralize everything. You know, what we use is ClickUp. We use ClickUp very heavily to centralize every process, every step of the way in each process. Everything that we do, we put into ClickUp. So there is no guessing about where do we find the latest process, where do we find what we need to do. No, it's in there. And then you can still link it to a Google Drive or whatever. But
And do you separate out the individual processes? So the process for
yeah,
content creation versus the process for onboarding.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I create like a library of our general processes, and then we do something specific for each client, for example, or something specific for marketing, for operations, and so on. And we use the templates of the processes to do that in a specific department. And then in the specific department, we can talk about improving those kind of processes so we can improve the templates, but have it centralized somewhere, even if it's just a Google sheet where you centralize the um, the processes, or Miro. Miro is a great tool as well to visualize everything, right? Play around with that, make it visual. I'm a very visual person, so I like to do that. Some people are more like structured with lists. Whatever your process is, again, to create your processes, it's fine. Just have them, centralize them, and make sure that if somebody comes on board in your business, that you can say, okay, here it is, go look there, go through everything, and then come back later if you've gone through everything. And what I also say is you have to record a video now on how you're going to do it. First of all, and then you do it, and you also record yourself while you're doing it, and you explain what are you doing, like what is the thought process behind what
The
you're
visual, the audio visual walkthrough.
yeah, if they do that, they have to think about what they are doing, why they are doing it, and then you can give feedback, right? So that's more asynchronous. You can do the pair working to do it really synchronously as well. Um, yeah, but that's how we make sure that our business becomes systemized, streamlined, and even in the early stages that we are in right now, it helps tremendously. It helps me getting less stressed because I know even when I'm not working at a certain moment because I have to do this or that, blah, blah, I already know that somebody else in my team is doing what otherwise would take me a lot of time, and I don't have the time for that right now. So it would cause a lot of stress. So just having that idea that somebody is doing the process that I was doing before, oof, that creates a lot of freedom in my head, that also just freedom of time.
There's a psychological element and then there's the actual scheduling element. But it's probably not an exaggeration. I'm laughing at myself as I say it. To think that, like, you tidy your bedroom and the world feels calmer. This is the equivalent of tidying your bedroom, providing order, a structure, a space in which your business can operate smoothly.
Yeah,
There's no
Yeah,
doubt
and
you have more bandwidth. And by the way, like the fact that you're doing the same tasks every time because it's a process means you get specialized. The person you delegate to gets specialized. You get into autopilot. You've also, through having to build the process, addressed all the inefficiencies because you've gone, oh, actually, doesn't it make sense now that I'm writing it down to not do it that way, but to do it this way instead?
hmm yeah,
It seems like something that we don't tend to think about until we're overwhelmed. And in some ways, that's probably the purpose of the overwhelm, right? As a feedback mechanism.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of starting business owners feel so overwhelmed with everything that they need to do. Um, the most important thing is to be aware of that you should be doing everything yourself. But if you're not aware of that, if you feel like, okay, I need to do this because that is supposed to happen, that's dangerous because then you keep doing it. You don't even think about how to delegate some of these things, and you get burned out because you don't want to do the stuff that you're doing day in day out. I know a lot of business owners that they start like with the organic outreach to do lead generation, but at certain point they just stop because they feel like it's just too much. I don't have time. It's too much energy. Instead of creating a process that they know, wait a minute, if I do ABC, then the outcome will be I have a lead, right? So if they feel
Mm.
overwhelmed and if they feel like they don't have the time, then they can remember, okay, wait a minute, I just need to do ABC and that will generate a lead. So why am I getting stressed here to do this? If I just know that I have to do this, this, and that will create the outcome.
Also, like, I think when we get overwhelmed by having lots of stuff to do, it's like I can't even approach all of this all at once. But when you break things down into little tasks, it feels more
Mm,
manageable. Now we know that that's a quirk of human psychology. That when you break things down, even though the size of the task remains the same, it's more manageable. A process has this added advantage. You are breaking it down step by step. So as you say, even if you're busy, okay, I can do steps 1 to 6, one at a time. It's just another form of order bringing. Um, what would you recommend to people who are hearing this and want to go do this today?
yeah, the first thing really is about being aware of what you're doing, right? Is knowing what kind of tasks are you doing day in day out that you can create a process around. And most of the times it's about lead generation, it's about content creation, marketing, delivery, operations, and so on. Onboarding people, offboarding people, those kind of things come into play day in day out. So if you think about that, analyze a little bit what you're doing, visualize it in any way that you want, right? And then record and create some kind of simple structure around what you have been doing step by step, and start with that. Really start with that. And if you have more clients coming in, immediately add somebody to your team that you can put some of this stuff towards them. And don't worry, it doesn't have to be something that is costing a lot of money. You can take an apprenticeship, for example, right? That wants
Mm.
to learn some of the stuff that you're doing. Start with that and learn the person on the job what they need to do. But have somebody that you can delegate things to. Even at the early stages, I believe you don't have to wait until you're doing X amount of money in revenue per month to onboard somebody that can help you out. Even if it's just for a couple of hours, right? That's still viable.
How do you have a particular platform to find people to help?
So I've used Acadium before. That is a platform that provides apprentices that want to learn digital marketing, right? And there are other platforms like even Upwork, Fiverr, or onlinejobs.ph where you can find people at lower cost that want to learn. And that's one of the important things is you want to have people that want to learn this stuff, whatever you're doing. If it's about off, offloading the marketing piece, well, find somebody that wants to learn digital marketing and help them with that. It seems like you are onboarding somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, but again, you're building a business and it's better to have somebody that you can mold using your processes than to having somebody that has a lot of experience and does all the things on their way. And
And
that
also,
doesn't.
like the marginal value of more experience ends up being relatively small for these tasks which you want to be relatively low skilled.
Exactly.
Trained, automated. Exactly.
Yeah.
Stefan, brilliant, mate. Thank you so much for taking us through that.
No problem. That was my pleasure.
So this has been a quick run through of the sort of perils and pitfalls and promises of systematizing and developing processes. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And as always, we'll be back on the LGBTQ plus business podcast next week.